Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today I wanted to cover some certificate related issues and considerations when you're installing MFPsecure and configuring it. It's going to be pretty specific based on what we need for MFPsecure, but there will be some certificate basics in this. So if you're unfamiliar in any way, you may get something out of this regardless. So when we go to a customer site or when we have a customer stand up a server, generally speaking, the server is going to have nothing on it, or it may have IIS on it. Obviously, if it doesn't have IIS, we want to install that. Once we get IIS up and running, the first thing I do is I go to the default website. This will do a couple things. When I sit down with a customer and I say, hey, open up the IIS default website, that obviously tells me if IIS is even installed. And if it's configured properly. I've seen plenty of customers not have a default website because their security team decided to uncheck every box because we didn't specifically ask them to check it. But I would specifically say you want a default install of IIS when you're going on site for a POC or a pilot. We're going to go to the default website and right-click Edit Bindings. And in here, generally speaking, you're going to not have this HTTPS. It'll just look like HTTP and that's it. So then we're going to add HTTPS, and in here what you're worried about is this SSL certificate. If you hit this drop down and there's nothing in here, then we need to stop and ask the customer, do you have CA signed certificates in your environment? Do you have a certificate authority in your environment for CA signed certs? Or is a self-signed cert preferable? If they do specify that they wish to use a self-signed cert, I usually tell the customer, okay, obviously, LRS as a company, we recommend signed certificates. Self-signed certs are definitely a security vulnerability. Regardless, go with what the customer wants. Let's pretend there's nothing in here. I'm going to cancel this and close this, and I'm going to go up to the website up here. I'm sorry, the server up here. This is the website down here. This is the actual IIS server. I'm going to go up to the server level, and I'm going to find server certificates. Double-click Server Certificates, and I'm going to create a self-signed certificate. This is the fully qualified name of the server's website, and we're going to store it in personal. Now, it's as simple as that. I just created a fully qualified name, self-signed certificate for my server. If the customer is using a signed certificate, obviously you would import that certificate into the server, and then it would become available in this screen to assign to the default website. We're going to cover that next. Sticking with self-signed, once I create this self-signed certificate, I'm going to go back down to my default website and edit bindings and add HTTPS. And I'm going to choose that certificate that I just created. And if I hit view, I can see it's self-signed because it's issued to and issued by is the same thing. If issued to and issued by is the same host or same text, same item, that means it's a self-signed certificate. The only other thing I would be interested in every once in a while here is the serial number. Sometimes I need to compare this serial number to various places to make sure I have the certificate that I think I have. We'll cover that later as well. Now that I have HTTPS assigned here, I'm going to go to my MFPsecure install area, which is Program Files, LRS, MFPsecure. So you can see the path up here. In here, I already have a couple certificates here. I'm going to delete these for the sake of this video. So after I have my self-signed certificate, I'm ultimately going to want two files in here. The exported certificate here. I'm going to export this certificate, and we're going to cover that next. I'll show you how to do that. And I'm going to export those certificates to files in my directory here. So the way to do that is I have to run MMC, and I have to add a snap-in called certificates, and I want to make sure that I select computer account. Now I have the local computer account certificates, and I'm going to go to personal. I can actually see my certificate here that I just created in IIS. It's this one. So again, if I look at the details here, I'm going to see the serial number 5E1D8A. And if I go here, same certificate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export. I can export from this screen or this screen. However, this area, this MMC snap-in, is very important for various other tasks. So we want to get used to coming in here and using this as well. So I'm going to export here. All tasks export. I'm going to make sure I do not export the private key. And I'm going to export as a base 64. And the file name is IIS space fully qualified server name. And I'm going to save this in the location we just talked about. Program files, LRS, MFPsecure. Browse to that location and save. Okay, so now, let me make this a little smaller. So now, if we look in this location down here, this is our MFPsecure location that we just talked about, program files, LRS, MFPsecure. Now I have IIS space fully qualified name.sir. So this is a fully qualified name of my MFPsecure server. And again, same serial number, no problem. So what I want to do next is I want to copy this certificate and I want to paste. And I'm going to rename to IIS space IP address. This is the IP address of the server. These two files are required for proper function of MFPsecure. These two files are what is pushed to the printer when we deploy. These will become CA certificates. When I go into the certificate area of the EWS of the printer, once I deploy, I'm going to see one of these certificates as a root level or intermediate level certificate. Now this is all in a self-signed environment, no problem. What if our customer has a CA signed environment, a CA server in their environment with signed certificates from that certificate authority? I'm going to want to take the certificate authority's certificate and place that in here. What does that mean? That means that whoever the main certificate authority for the customer's environment, that certificate authority has its own certificate, and that's what I want to place in here with the same names that you see here. That way, that certificate gets deployed to the printer as a root level or intermediate level certificate authority, meaning when you scan your badge at the printer, the first thing it's going to do is come back to our server, HTTPS. And the second thing it's going to do is verify, after the handshake, it's going to verify the certificate, or during the handshake, it's going to verify the certificate of the server it's going back to. How does it do that? The printer contacts our server gives the printer the certificate that's assigned to the IIS binding in here. It will deliver this certificate. The printer will then go to parse through its root level certificates, finding the correct CA that signed this certificate, and it will say, hey, is this certificate valid? And without us pushing the signed certificate via our deployment here, that printer would potentially not have that root level or intermediate level certificate authority, and the communication would not work. So as a flow, again, with a signed certificate, I'm placing the chain of authority, the CA level certificate in here, and I'll show you how to get that right now. Okay, so I've switched over to a client machine of mine, and I'm going to look at the signed certificate on this machine. So again, if we're in an environment where the company has said that they have a signed certificate environment from their own CA, we're going to find that. So we got to go into run the MMC again in the certificate section here, and we're going to see issued by and issued to, two different things. And we'll say, hey, customer, is this issued by your CA? And they'll say yes or no. If it is, we can double click on this. We can see some details about this, but we don't really care too much. What we care about is the certification path. If I click on the CA here, the top level, this is the certificate for the certificate authority. So if I view this, I can actually save that. So I double click on the certificate authority certificate, it pops up, I hit details, and I hit copy to file. Again, base 64. And I'm going to save that again in the same format that we talked about before. Again, I'm on a client machine here, so obviously I would do this on the server, but just to give you an idea, after I export that, I'm going to find it wherever I exported it, and I'm going to copy that and put that in the MFPsecure directory. All right, so once we have all of that sorted out and we know where we are with certificates, self-signed or signed, we can go into the admin console of VPSX and add the MFPsecure server. So once we're in the VPSX admin console, we're going to click on MFPsecure on the left and add MFPsecure server. And the initial screen we're going to get is just IIS and LDAP. That's how it's configured by default. We're going to click configure here. Now, after all the work we did with the create self-signed certificate and CA signed stuff, we don't want to do any kind of create certificate here at all. As you can see, it's already finding the certificate that we placed in there. That's fine. That's all we need. Continue on as normal to configure your MFPsecure instance. Now, once we deploy, if we run into any kind of certificate errors, there's a few different ways to tackle it. Generally, if there's an error on the screen for some kind of SSL or TLS thing, there's going to be a URL associated with it. We can put that URL in our web browser, and with this lock icon, we'll be able to see the certificate that we're being served. Depending on your browser, there'll be a lock icon or some kind of, if it's self-signed, some kind of red icon or some kind of exclamation like this one has. This is Firefox. And if we go in here, we can actually view the certificate itself. And again, here's that serial number. We can double check that we're getting the same serial number certificate as the one in the IIS console, which again is that binding on the default website. All right, so the last thing I wanted to talk about as far as troubleshooting TLS issues, certificate issues, is Wireshark. Wireshark can be very handy. It can feel overwhelming at first, but it doesn't have to be. So you can see here a simple hello exchange and handshake between my client and a server. Not too bad. What I would do is I would install Wireshark and just go to, say, lrs.com and capture while you go to lrs.com, and you'll get, as you can see, this TLS handshaking going on back and forth. And then application data here is where it's actually starting to send the web page information. So it's kind of interesting to pick this apart. Here's the initial hello when I told the browser to go to that URL. And as you can see here, there's some information about the TLS handshake and from the server hello on. So we start out at 1.2. I think we negotiate up to 1.3 at one point. So there's various interesting things we can find here. And say, for instance, I have seen it before where if this is a printer communicating to MFPsecure, after it negotiates the hello and the actual connection, the communication just stops. And we've seen that with certain printers that needed firmware upgrades, and potentially we've had to communicate with the printer vendor outside of working with the customer, calling a ticket with their help desk kind of thing. So don't be afraid of Wireshark. It's a really powerful tool. It's something you should definitely get used to and at least be fluent enough with it to do a simple capture like this. So I know we covered a lot, and we covered it a few different ways. Hopefully it was detailed enough for you to learn something. But at this point, you should have enough knowledge to go where to look and search and assign certificates for the MFPsecure install. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next one.